Hello, are you on the line?
I am. Hello.
Yeah, I have a good connection here, so I'm ready to talk to you about this.
Well, I guess I'll start with where are you?
I'm near a place, a very small town called Terra Alta, West Virginia. This is just west of the border between West Virginia and Maryland. It's somewhat in a mountainous area.
What brought you out there?
Before I get to that, let me actually tell you a little interesting experience I had when I first arrived. I did not know where I was going to stay when I got out here, and I knew it was going to be probably about a week. I very quickly checked online. I got a place, a very tiny house out in this area, very wooded, mountainous region. It's one of those places that even has they replaced the locks with a keyless entry, sort of an electronic system. So I simply emailed a code. Rented a car. I drove out here. Got quieter and quieter. I finally got to this little tiny place. Threw my backpack down, and I had a couple of hours of daylight left. So what I thought I'd do is just go for a walk around this area. Having no idea really where I was, and being about 25 miles from the place where I had come to research. It's off season out here. In winter, there's skiing. In summertime, there's boating and lots of lake activities. But now it's in that in between time. So I began to walk along these unmarked country roads, no traffic going past, and where I am, it's just this enormous warren, like almost a maze of deserted small vacation homes. Some are nothing more than large cabins, really, and I walked and kept walking as the light was fading, and these places are spaced out about a quarter mile apart on the road. And I realized that every single one I was passing, every single one was deserted for the season. And I had this mental map as I walked around, and I realized fairly soon that the place that I have rented is dead center in this maze of roads, very woodsy, where there is no one, where I seem to be completely alone, having been the one person who seems to want to be out here at this time. And it just sort of it falls into really, I guess, the theme of why I came out here, which was to look into this one situation, something involving a woman and her aunt, a bit of a mysterious happening. As I'm speaking to you, it's getting dark again out here, and I am utterly alone, surrounded on all sides by empty houses.
Firstly, are those things you're experiencing kind of meeting up with the subject of your, I guess I'll say, research? Do you feel afraid at all where you are right now?
Not afraid, but I did come out here to look into frightening things, and this vast silence that I didn't expect all around me is making me think not just of this woman and her aunt and what happened in a small space out here in West Virginia, but the likelihood that there must be dozens of similar stories anywhere that night comes to abandoned places. Let me lead into the details by saying I've always thought that when the sun goes down, the world becomes like a game of musical chairs. Everyone has to go to their place and rest their weary heads. The vast majority of us have that place where we go. Then there's the second category of people who economically can't make that happen, sadly. We call them the homeless. But then there is a third category, and these are the strange ones who, when night falls, they shelter in places where they should not. These are the ones I'm looking into, and it was not difficult to find their stories. In fact, I was disturbed to find I had to be selective in choosing where to travel first.
Well, tell me more about what you're finding where you are.
When Cora first heard a second voice coming from the guest house, summer was nearly gone. It sat in the back of the yard. Aunt Lo had been living there nearly a year. She decorated the house with her favorite things and hung gauzy, handmade curtains in the small windows. She was alone then, as was Cora, and Aunt Lo's pains circled closer each day, but she still carried light and joy, and Cora thought she could learn from her how to live in the remaining world, in the days left to her. Cora went in sometimes to clean and tidy up, though Aunt Lo kept a neat house. She always had. At some point, Lo started putting out 2 table settings, 2 cups, 2 saucers, 2 embroidered napkins. But like her body, her mind was loosening. She said it felt like she left little pieces of herself behind wherever she went. "I heard you singing this morning," Cora said. They sat in the garden after dinner most evenings, watching little flies dart around in the slow light. They'd swat the odd mosquito and squint at the tiny red aphids under the leaves of Cora's plants. She'd ordered 2 whole boxes of ladybugs and let them loose, hoping they'd kill them, but they didn't. They flew off somewhere and returned sporadically, and landed on their wrists and on the flat arms of chairs. "Oh, yes," Aunt Lo said. "That's a song my friend taught me." Cora had heard of her friend before. She didn't want to press. She was glad Lo still had things that brought her peace, real or imagined. But this friend was making more appearances lately. Just the other night, Lo had asked for an extra piece of cake to take back to him. Cora obliged, even carried it back for her over the lawn and through the hanging willow branches. And when she got inside, Cora gently handed the pieces to her one by one. One morning, Cora woke up very early. She was having some personal troubles and couldn't sleep. She leaned against the counter by the sink and watched her little gray dog stare out into the backyard. Familiar. "What is it, boy?" Cora asked. His tail swung side to side. For a while after that, Cora listened closely, watched. She thought someone moved around the sides of the house at night, but she could never see anything, and in the mornings would feel foolish. She searched. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" Cora asked Aunt Lo more often. "Oh, no," Lo would say, and smile. "Not at all." The next October, Lo passed. Tucked into bed, on her back, she looked quiet, gentle as glass. Cora went around the little house, handling her things with as much love and care as she could. She picked up a piece of paper on the table. The note read, "Thank you for telling yourself I didn't exist. Because you know I did. Goodbye."
That thing that you said about there are all these mysterious things going on when night falls. You know, I was thinking back to my friend and I don't even know what grade we were in. We were very young. We were always finding these little spots kind of around the area where we lived. There was a big field in between our houses. We would always find spots that were not really hidden, but we imagined that they were more hidden than they were. Because we craved kind of having a place for ourselves, or something to make into a fort, or just a spot where we could pretend we lived, or we could imagine that there would be some sort of catastrophic event, meaning that we would have to, like some of the children in the books that we read, they would be forced to survive on their own, and so we would have to do the same, and we would find a spot, and we would kind of make it our fort or our home base, and we'd do things like, we'd practice making little like fish hooks as if there was no water anywhere nearby. But I remember that I was reading My Side of the Mountain, and there's a whole, I think there's even a drawing about how to make your own fish hooks from wood splinters. These spots, one of them in particular was just really between my backyard and our next door neighbor's backyard. It was just a little channel that went between the fences. And if you followed it all the way back, there was a little area where you could sit, and it was covered, and it felt perfect for one of our fort projects, our fort declarations. And for some reason, occasionally we would return to these spots, and there would be signs that someone had been there in the night or between visits. It was the strangest feeling, because it was this mix of, there's a sense of violation, of course, but it was kind of made larger by this idea that the traces that we would find, like maybe it would be a bottle, or things would be moved around, like little stones that we had placed around. There was always kind of a mysterious narrative left. So our minds were going, and we had to kind of imagine this scene. Probably just kids, like we were, or someone who needed to pass the night. But the other thing is, these spots were very close to our homes, especially that spot at the back of the fences where they met. This was right next to my home, right next to my window. So it somehow also reinforced this idea that things were happening out there in the dark, that it wasn't our imagination, it wasn't, just childish fears, that there was another world. There were always things going on that we couldn't see in the dark. I still remember it to this day, how that felt.
I grew up as an only child in a very, very large, very old house. And I lived in that house until I was about 10, doing all the usual explorations and imagination games. And when I think back on my childhood in that big house, sometimes I think that I simply did not know every inch of the place. I did not know its geography in total. There were crevices, little passageways maybe, cracks in the walls that I probably never knew were there. Now, these are thoughts that didn't occur to me when I was a child playing. I thought as a child, this is my home. This is my house. I know it perfectly. But if you think about it, we really didn't. If you grew up in a house of any real size, you probably didn't know every square inch. And just to think of that is kind of mysterious to me. That who knows what might have been hiding there without us realizing it.
I always fairly desperately imagined that I would someday, discover some kind of a secret passageway, or when I would go over to to friends' homes, I was always kind of looking for the odd kind of, oh, where does that door lead to? Or, we all had attics in our homes, but no one ever went up to their attics. So that was always very fascinating to me. Like, what is up there? Why don't you go up there? What goes on up there? Why can't I go up there? How do you get up there? Have you ever gone up there? And it's true. It's very true. The spaces that we inhabit, you take for granted that you know them intimately, but just the idea that there can be a space or there can be someone breaching that barrier. These are all very frightening concepts. I don't know how long you're planning to spend out there or what other things you're pursuing, but I do know of a situation. Let's say it may involve adding some time, probably at least another full day of travel. But I really think that this may be of interest to you. I know of a woman who has had a situation with her next door neighbor in an apartment building. She's become very afraid and is starting to unravel quite completely. So I would use caution in speaking with her. But something is definitely going on there, and I think that this could. I think that this fits right into what you're investigating.
All right, I'll go check it out.
The apartment next door to mine is empty. That is, I think it is empty. It's technically empty. It's supposed to be empty. To start, I've been hyper aware of the space for a long time. I formed a belief that the wall is thinner there on my pillow side, and it's true that my neighbors have traditionally been careless. So it was because of this irritation, which grows to hostility, which grows to anger, that explains my absolute glee at the signs of exit and then, finally, the apparent exit itself. But something else has appeared in their place. I've heard things. Put simply, there's movement in there. Someone is moving next door. Someone is in there, moving through the space. It started with the cupboards. There's a particular door in the area of the kitchen that bounces shut like a rubber ball. I started hearing this bounce without pretense at times like 4 a.m. I thought someone's settled in quietly without my noticing. Maybe they live simply, or travel light, or don't have many things. But then, nothing. I walk by the windows next door, day and night, finding reasons. The lights are off. The blinds are drawn. Or, the lights are off. The blinds are open. The light from their porch door glows through the kitchen. I can also tell it's a man. I just feel it. He started reacting to my movements, mirroring them. I can hear him shuffle and stop on the other side of the wall. Sometimes he leaves at odd hours, but only the back door snaps. Then he comes back, too soon to have worked at anything, to have performed any job, or visited any friend. I don't know where this stands. Well, yes, I do. Even in emptiness, I can't be allowed a silence. I seem to be the only one hearing this, fighting this battle. Now we're here as we sooner or later are. We cannot square the outside with the in. I can't square it, the outside with the in. I know there's someone in there. Someone I can't see. You understand me, don't you? Then help me. I know better than to ask because no one can help anyone else. What am I to think? Do? It's the loneliest thing in the world, recognizing a ghost. Convince me it isn't, and I'll ask him to stay.
Many years ago, I was sort of on the trail of some information. I was in Russia. I was traveling along Lake Baikal, sort of south of Irkutsk. And word got to me, I won't say how, that I was suddenly in some danger. And that what I had to do for a few days was travel on foot, completely off the grid, being as discreet as humanly possible. So I kept making my way towards the west. I began to get very afraid for my safety. And I came across a boat yard where a lot of boats were in dry dock, small sailboats. And what I did was I crawled up onto one of them, went down below decks, and for 3 days I simply cowered there, not leaving unless it was absolutely necessary. I had virtually no food, no water. But I felt that I should not even raise my head out of that sailboat until I felt safe again. And I can't tell you how frustrating, boring, and terrifying that was. But on the third night, I remember being somewhat at the end of my sanity almost. And I heard from above feet up on the deck of the boat. Someone had climbed up the ladder, up the supports, and was on top of the sailboat. And I was down below deck. I rose, I stood there in the dark. Had no lights on, of course, and I remember I was holding something, but I don't know what, and I just waited. And I had become the someone, the stranger, the mystery in the dark. At that moment, I was the other. The footsteps stopped, and no one ever came down. And I woke up at dawn, and I left the sailboat, and I made my way toward Irkutsk. The odd thing is, since that experience, I've been maybe in taxis in a new city or going through some small town, and I'll always look at the houses around me, the houses in the strange spaces, the abandoned alleys, and I always think to myself, if the sun goes down right now and I had to go to ground, would I go into that porch over there? Where would I hide? Where would I try to evade being seen? Where would I put my head down?
Yes, this conversation has brought up a memory for me. Forgive me, I'm feeling some tension about this memory because that it's not my story to tell. And I also want to be protective of the person who told me. Oh, it was probably, 20 years ago. I was living in a town, in a college town, and I had friends, a bit older, very, very kind to me, very wonderful, very inspirational, kind of a mentor, really. Her husband, at the time, was the fire chief. There was something that she told me from what he told her. There had been a house that burned. It was one of the older homes on one of the main streets that cuts through town. Her husband told her that there was a fire at the house, and in the investigation afterward, there were some details that emerged. He could tell that there were people staying in the house, squatting in the house. He could also tell that There were very aberrant and terrible and frightening things that had been going on in the house. He wouldn't tell her any more than that. That was as specific as he would get. And just that restraint and that decision to stop the information right there, that I found completely bone chilling. Actually, this whole episode, when you just told your story, I couldn't help but think of that. I struggled with myself whether or not to share it because, like I say, you can see it's hardly a story, but it's a terrifying idea. I think it really underlines that you can't know what goes on at nights when you can't see. Yes, just these spaces that we think we know, we think we're familiar with. It's a lie. It's a lie. But it's terrifying to believe that, because how are we to believe that and go through the world, go through our daily lives? It's almost too much to bear.
There's an even more subtle concept going on here. If you're walking along a country road and you look over at a vacant lot, and there's what we refer to as a spook house, an abandoned house, someone obviously once lived there, and you just know that at some point in the intervening years, someone entered there when they should not have. Now, maybe they were just staying the night, maybe they were huddled against the cold, they just wanted to move on afterwards, or maybe they did something sinister. But either way, it's sort of a horrible trespass against the memory of the people who came first. Entire lives were led in this house, this ivy-covered house by the side of the road. And then here come strangers who know nothing of those people, knew nothing of that family. It's almost an act of violence against the past. Just someone laying their head down in the dust, in the dark, and leaving the next day.
That word you used, trespass. Yes, that seems like a very loaded word.